was classmates with my brothers. So again, we have that strong Gila connection, and that's what Hawaii is all about, right? Having these strong connections and staying connected no matter how far you are. You know, I hope that as we navigate this COVID era, that we can continue to work together or start straightening a relationship, because moving forward, it is going to be all about partnerships and collaborations. So I look forward to continuing our communication between our organization and our organizations as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry Ann. And one of the things I should have said, and I apologize, I should have introduced myself as well. I'm Michael. A lot of you already know me. I'm the president of the HCCNC, so sorry about that. But probably more important than me, we have our founder and one of the executive committee members of the HCCNC, Eric Tao, who started this organization over 20 years ago. Eric is a partner at L37, been deeply involved in both the community here in the Bay Area and the real estate market as well. Eric, I mean, he does so much behind the scenes, and it's really an honor to be a part of the organization that he founded and still is so actively participating in. So Eric, without further ado, I'll hand over to you, and you can do the intros for Rodney. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. And I'm coming to you virtually live from the old Hukilau, San Francisco. One day, hopefully, we'll all be together having a drink like the old days. And what Sherry said is so correct. Hawaii Chamber of people from Hawaii, it's all about connections and family relationships and ohana and treating everyone inclusively. And that's why I'm so happy that we have Rodney here. Rodney, other than the fact we share the same hairdresser, I'm pretending a lot of people are laughing out there in the Zoom land. But there are a few people up here in San Francisco when I moved here and became friends that I really felt the local kindred spirit. Rodney and his family, they're one of those people. And beyond that, Rodney, he's owned and run small businesses, big businesses. He's helped run the Fishermen's Wharf Merchants Association. He's been a port commissioner, so that's all about commerce and trade. Currently, he's been a planning commissioner, so he understands real estate and development. Currently, he's president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of San Francisco. And so he's touched on all aspects of business, small and big. And many of our members and many of you are part of small businesses. So I think it's important that we have somebody with that perspective, not just from the high level with the big muckety mucks, but also everyday people trying to get by in COVID. And he's been challenged, and he's on the task force right now to help get our economy back and help save small businesses and make sure that we can get back on our feet. And so we're lucky that we have somebody who has that experience, who's doing it right now. And we're going to learn about what works, what doesn't work, what we're going to try to do, what also comes with the Kama'aina heart and spirit. And so he really connects with our organization. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Rodney Fong, president of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Eric. That is a very nice introduction, and you're right. It's kind of fitting to some degree. I think all of us, Hawaii, California, San Francisco, we are starting at ground zero to some degree economically here. And so you and I attended one of the musubi eating contests that you had a few years ago. That's like guerrilla marketing, creative stuff, and we are going to be forced to do those kind of things again. So the timing is important to have that background. Thank you for having me. And as Eric had mentioned, I grew up in a very strange background. I grew up inside of a wax museum, and that meant carrying full body figures of Frankenstein, Dracula, werewolf down the street. Growing up in that, I didn't really think anything of it. Holding Marilyn Monroe unclothed and bringing her into a new set or setting it up. But that really taught me a lot about small business. And a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that is how you can understand by operating a small business or being a part of a small business or organization, everything from payroll to HR to making the bills to hiring to letting folks go when you have to, the marketing piece, and you become a jack of all trades. Now we've all become virtual jack of all trades as well and understand that need to pivot. The biggest thing I learned from my grandfather in those small businesses was the sense of community. And I know that's said a lot, especially in kind of groups like this, but it is so important in a big city that you have some form of society, some sort of form of community, and some sort of form of watching out for each other. We're missing that so dearly right now in San Francisco, and I know all over. And if we can, I know all of us on this call understand that, but if we can start to share that in some way through our local businesses, through our memberships, through our associations, this is fantastic. I want to touch on a few things, if I can, just an overview of San Francisco. And it's bits and pieces that you all know and have heard already, but you know, they all sort of start to tie together. Obviously, this last 5-6 months has been incredibly difficult for everybody. And I don't think there's a sector, there's not a person or a size of business that doesn't have the same sort of gut worry in their stomach, that anxiety of what's next and how we're going to rebuild and how we're going to survive. Between the economic downturn, the pandemic, of course, that downturn started as a crisis. I think in San Francisco, we are in economic disaster mode. And the tail of this thing as it whips around is still yet to be really seen by most people. When we get back out of shelter in place, we'll start to realize the long-term damage that has occurred here in San Francisco. Obviously, the Black Lives Matters was incredibly important, poignant, and disruptive. Civil unrest, the presidential election coming up is going to be however it turns out, is going to be impactful for the United States. And of course, these firestorms over the last couple of days have just been icing on top of the cake here. So I think in a very strange way, it is good that all these things are coming together, because it is opportunity for us to shake things up, to try to make things better, to make the economic conditions and the way we do things better. It's certainly not going to be the same. I want to talk a little bit about the Chamber, and it's actually, we're, believe it or not, celebrating our 170th anniversary this year. And of all years to be celebrating a significant anniversary, with any luck, 175 will do some sort of ribbon cutting on the new San Francisco 3.0. But the last 5 months have been really almost, as Sherry knows, in triage mode, working with all businesses of all sizes, big and small, helping them figure out PPE, helping them figure out SBA loans, working very closely with our mayor's office and our board of supervisors to try to help with business interruption related things. We were able to pass some fees or have some fees delayed. We were able to delay property tax payments by 30 days, which doesn't sound like that much but for a big skyscraper, that's a lot of money for 30 days. We worked with Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara to try to help business interruption claims happen. I'm not so sure how many were actually effective, but we were able to get some of that language, that very first language when Mayor Breed called for a shelter in place, to get that language in there to try to make those claims. Hopefully some of the things that we start to see as temporary effects to help regenerate San Francisco's business community will stay and become permanent things. We're starting to see the mayor act on a ballot measure that she has on the November ballot, which is a small business measure that helps businesses get back on track. It helps the permitting system in San Francisco, which many of you know is incredibly complicated, long. This is why Eric has long gray hair now, because he's been dealing with the entitlement process in San Francisco and some of his great development projects. And so hopefully that becomes streamlined, but we're going to need to do that, and all of us are going to need to step up to help with that. About 4 months ago, the mayor put together, like many cities and states, put together an economic recovery task force. And so I was able to sit on that with, she asked me to sit on it with Carmen Chu, our assessor, the treasurer of San Francisco, Jose Cisneros, and Rudy Gonzalez, who's the director of San Francisco Labor Council. The four of us convened, we put together our overall parameters. We selected, which was a very difficult process, selected 80 people to represent every industry in San Francisco. And as you all guys know, that's everything from big companies, tech, manufacturing, restaurants, hotels, hospitality. All of them had representation, all of them had a stake in it. And we convened over 100 or so meetings with all of them, boiled that down to 50 or so real hard, tangible items. We asked them to look at really low-hanging fruit, easy to do things, quick fixes. We asked them to look at mid-range things that could be accomplished within a year or two. And then we really asked them to take the opportunity to look at long-range things. What are those infrastructure things? What are those long-term building projects, maybe that were entitled, but for some reason weren't able to get executed? What are the job creators? The funny and ironic thing of all that, that was 4.5, 5 months ago. Now, if you ask those same questions, it would be very different, the answers. Some of the low-hanging fruit was like, hey, the close the streets and put restaurants out, and let's put an amphitheater for music. Great idea, fantastic. Hukilau actually did it long before, and they were outdoor dining in San Francisco, and maybe the windiest, coldest block of San Francisco. So hats off to them for doing that. But I think now we have over 153,000 unemployment claims in San Francisco. That's a record number. And so we really have to be thinking about jobs, jobs, jobs. What Hawaii and San Francisco have deeply in common is tourism. And for San Francisco's case, about a third of the San Francisco's revenue comes from tourism. Jobs that are, we all know it, are associated but unassociated. Florists, caterers, linen companies, they all are having such a difficult time both in Hawaii and San Francisco, and we need to try to open them back up, obviously very safely. But those are a lot of jobs that are, and lives are at stake. And that's honestly what sort of keeps me up at night, worrying about those people. Many of them are adults, older citizens who, you know, it's not the best for them to go back to school and retrain for a virtual job. So we've really got to take that into consideration and think about what projects we can put them back to work in. I want to continue to talk a little bit about the Recovery Task Force. You know, when we started this, we were talking about the recoveries generally have an L-shaped recovery, a U-shape, or a sharp V. The worst one is a W-shaped recovery. This is exactly what San Francisco and much of the nation has gone through. This, we're open, hey, we're closed. We're open again, we're closed. The average small business can't afford to open and close several different times like that. And we're probably in our third or fourth round of open, close, open, close. Tomorrow, we're expecting the governor to lift San Francisco off of the watch list, which is great. It doesn't honestly really change things in San Francisco very much because San Francisco had a pretty stringent ban on a lot of types of businesses and activities already. But getting off that list means that we're no longer at the governor's control, but we're back to the mayor and our local county health director, which is fantastic. So hopefully we get a little more movement there. Changes going forward, downtown San Francisco, if anybody's driven down, bring a box of Kleenex. It is a pretty scary sight, I'm afraid to say. This is the city I grew up in. This is the city my parents grew up in. City my grandmother was born in. City my great-grandmother was born in 1898. And it just crushes my heart to see San Francisco so quickly fall. I do know that San Francisco has the spirit and the ingenuity and the creativity to rise again very quickly if we want to, if we make it easy for folks to do it. And I'm a strong believer in creativity and innovation. And to some degree, our government, and we are part of that, need to get out of the way and let creativity happen. We need to take some chances and trust people in business that they're going to do the right thing and that they can imagine their way into prosperity for all of us. That is the bigger change. We do have some very significant things like homeless and street conditions in San Francisco. Honolulu has its own very significant problem as well. And I'm not sure if either of us have managed it better than others. We've had different approaches in different situations, but it is a major piece when you're trying to attract people to a great city and you want them to enjoy the walkability of either the streets of San Francisco or the beaches of Hawaii. They are outdoors, and that element needs to be taken care of if we're going to invite them there. The irony is that one of the solutions are these open streets and shared streets and pushing dining out into the street. Well, if we're going to do that, if we're going to ask people to serve food outside, we've got to have clean streets to be able to support that. And that's just a turnoff for everybody and a health concern going forward. San Francisco has been the golden child. For the last 10, 15 years, you guys know we've ridden this crazy, unbelievable wave of success. And in so many conversations at lunch, all of us have been saying, oh, it's still frothy, it's still frothy. When's the bubble gonna burst? But when's the bubble gonna burst? Well, I think that time has come. San Francisco and the Chamber of Commerce before I got here, but has not had to be in the economic development business. We haven't had to be out there luring companies to San Francisco, taunting or teasing them to stay in San Francisco. And so we are finding ourselves in the middle of that, trying to explain why San Francisco is still the best place, which I still believe it is. but it isn't a very expensive place to do business in San Francisco, the most expensive place. We're going to have to try to reinvent ourselves and find out what the next industry is for San Francisco. We had the media adults, we had tech, we had biotech. What is next for San Francisco, and what's the infrastructure that we need to set up for that? These are value proposition questions that all of us need to ask ourselves. We need to come together in a room and answer and ask ourselves, hey, what do we want to look like in 2030? And what does it take to get there? Do we want a total homogeneous cross-section of San Francisco? Probably not. But what percentage of middle income jobs do we ideally want in San Francisco? What percentage do we want of people of kids and families in San Francisco? They are slowly getting squished out and squeezed out as well. The work from home thing, I think that probably was something that was coming all along, and many of our tech and cloud related virtual companies were moving in that direction ultimately. What is very interesting, and you ask some of the tech firms and you wonder why they don't seem like they're as invested into San Francisco. There are really only a handful that actually bought real estate in San Francisco. Most of them were tenants that maybe leased an entire building, entire skyscraper, maybe even the tallest skyscraper in San Francisco. But whether or not they really made real estate investment into the city, not many did. And so that makes it easy for them to essentially walk away from leases. I say this not to be a doomsday or a wet blanket, but it just points to how we need to create incentives for business to stay, for business to grow, for people to develop things, to continue feeding our workers, whether it's the construction world, whether it's the IT world, whether it's community colleges. Just the whole system now is so intertwined and symbiotic that not one piece of that can be left behind, and it all needs to go together in harmony. I want to stop there for a second and get a little bit into the current events and of this November. And obviously, we've all been tracking the federal stuff, which is national stuff, which is interesting and fascinating. We've all been looking at some of the state issues. But on the local issues for San Francisco, if we can talk just a minute about 3 taxes, and those of you that maybe aren't in San Francisco, it's still really important because San Francisco has always been sort of this place where a lot of things are tested. And if it's successful in San Francisco, it ends up in another city in another state. And so we have a lot of eyes on us right now. I want to introduce Jay Chang, who's our Director of Public Policy, and talk about 3 taxes: a CEO tax, a gross receipts tax, and a real estate transfer tax. We've also set up a nonprofit organization out of the chamber, which you can follow this as it goes along and really become educated. As we talked about, San Francisco has been a golden child, and people have been able to sit back, right? We've been able to sort of enjoy our government go way left, and we knew that the economy was going to be there to salvage it, to fix it. It was going to be okay. This may not be the case going forward. So it's really important that the everyday average San Franciscan really begins to focus and understand what district they live in, who their supervisor is, how these ballot measures are titled to be very twisting, and what they really, really mean to us as San Franciscans. So please, Jay, take it away.
Thanks so much, Rodney. I really appreciate it. As Rodney said, we're facing 3 different tax measures on the ballot. And in fact, maybe if the host could give me a screen sharing capability, that would be really great. And we can kind of go through it really quickly. And thank you so much. Bear with us for just a second. So like everybody else is going through, the City Hall has not been immune to the pandemic. And what's interesting right now, City Hall is in a very difficult budget fight. You can see here, Mayor Breed and the public service unions are fighting over pay raises during this time, $250 million in pay raises. And just for quick perspective, San Francisco's city budget is larger than 13 other states. We have $12 billion in our city budget today. It's doubled over the last decade. And so for those who live in San Francisco, the question is, do you feel like things are twice as good as they were 10 years ago? But unlike our businesses, when the city faces a budget deficit of $1.7 billion, it has very easy benefits to increase its cash flow, right? To increase its cash flow, it just needs to raise taxes. And that's what it's doing this November. There are 3 different business tax proposals on this November's ballot that we're going to be facing. I'm not going to go into in depth on any one of them, but we're just kind of going to go through them very quickly to give you a flavor of what we're facing in San Francisco. The first one's a transfer tax. It doubles the transfer tax on any properties valued over $10 million. As folks like Eric probably know very well, this is going to have a big impact on housing production. To build those projects that have affordable housing in them, that have deeply needed housing available to them, you're going to need to purchase vacant lots that are well over $10 million. This adds millions of dollars to a bottom line, making those housing projects infeasible. The other thing about the transfer tax that people don't talk about is that this transfer tax is also something you pay when you have to renew, renegotiate, sign, or transfer a small business lease. And so if you are signed up for a storefront right now and you have to renegotiate your lease or you have to break your lease, you're going to be hit with this transfer tax. That's not something that most people worry about on an everyday kind of basis, but in the middle of a pandemic, when so many small businesses are trying to get out of their real estate leases, this is a big issue. The next one is the compensation ratio tax. They often call it about the CEO tax. If your highest paid manager globally, your CEO, makes more than 100 times your median employee in San Francisco, your taxes are going to increase. A lot of people think about LinkedIn, Facebook, Microsoft, when they think about this tax, oh, isn't this just going to apply to Amazon? The surprising thing is that most tech companies will not pay this tax. The folks who are going to pay this tax are retailers, manufacturers, and hotels. Because for tech companies, their software engineers usually make too much money and they're too close to the CEO to face this tax. The people who are really going to pay this tax are like Adidas, who have entry-level workers here, but they're CEOs over in Berlin. And so those are the folks who are going to pull out of San Francisco and leave to avoid paying this tax. And the final one is a business tax overhaul. This is Prop F on the ballot. This is going to overhaul our entire business tax structure. It's going to do a couple of things that we want to highlight. The first one is it's going to give a tax break to some industries. If you run a hotel, a restaurant, retail, manufacturing, a bar in San Francisco, you're going to get a 50% tax break for the next 2 years. And then on year 3, you're going to get a 25% tax break. This is a big deal because we never give tax breaks out in San Francisco. And so this is something that I know a lot of businesses are looking forward to. I like putting the slide up because this is something that Rodney fought really hard with the Board of Supervisors. We spent a lot of hours working on this issue. So props up to Rodney for getting through this one. It's not all good news though. If you work in tech, banking, or you're an attorney, you're going to see a 20% tax increase over the next 4 years. If you work in biotech or you're headquartered here or you work in real estate, you're going to see a 15% tax increase over the next 4 years. It's going to look like this. You notice in the next year, 2021, there is no tax increase. And starting 2022, it will start to phase in. There's an economic trigger on this tax increase. The first trigger comes in 2023. If we're not at 90% of 2019 economic activity, that tax increase is going to be delayed 1 year. Same thing happens in 2024. It will be delayed 1 year. So this 4-year staggered tax increase could be stretched out to a 5-year staggered tax increase. I mentioned this again because economic triggers is something that we've really fought hard for, Rodney really fought hard for, that if you were supposed to do tax increases, it should be pegged on where your economy is. If your economy is really jamming, if it's doing well, then okay, maybe tax increases are appropriate. But if we're not there, then why are we increasing taxes? This is not ideal. This is not where we wanted to be in this negotiation, but it is something that we managed to get out of that negotiation. And so with that, those are the 3 tax measures that are facing the ballot. It's a pretty heavy ballot this November. There's over 12 different ballot measures that we're facing locally in San Francisco. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Rodney.
Jay, if you don't mind me asking one question really quick, where should people go to learn more about this and to get a better, can they go to your folks' website or is there a place? We'll obviously post.
Yeah, absolutely. People can go to the website savesfjobs.com. That's our website, savesfjobs.com, to learn more about these things. I'll also put the links in the chat.
Thank you, Jay. Hopefully my sound's a little bit better. Let me know, Michael, if that's any better this time around. Thank you. So as Jay pointed out, these are pretty hefty measures and they are written to confuse people. So, take the time, give us a call at the Chamber of Commerce, San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, got to be clear tonight. If you want any questions answered, or you want someone else to take a look at your particular business and have questions about maybe where you think you might fall. We'd also love, this is a great time. I think this pandemic is gonna, I hope, and I think, and we're seeing it daily basis, awaken a lot of businesses that have been just so heads down in their business because they do marketing, they do sales, they do the manufacturing, they do the drawing, that they've been too busy to sort of look up for a second and see what's going on. I'm sure Sherry at the State Hawaii Chamber of Commerce has the same relationship with its members, and trying to retain their membership, retain their business, help them get through it is sort of our job at the moment. We are not necessarily experts. We're here to ask questions. We're here to put the experts, subject matter experts, on the stage and let them share with us what their challenges are, and collectively. But as Sherry knows, the power in numbers is phenomenal. And right now, if we can show that power of, I don't even want to say the business community, but folks who are in the business community, and nonprofits, and basically people who are employers and employ people right now, if we can come together and move forward and ask and call upon our government to do the right things to help us rebuild, and not necessarily squeeze, but help stimulate, then we are going to be in better shape. I want to open up to questions, and you can use the chat room, and maybe Michael will help moderate that a little bit. But before we do that, as you're asking thinking about some questions, there are a couple things that are so important for the city and wherever you live, really. One of them is broadband. And it's just so important that in San Francisco, outside of San Francisco, that we all have the equal access to broadband. I know that sounds simple, and we're all on a Zoom right now, but not everybody has that opportunity. Not everyone has a quiet room. Not everyone has the speed and capability to even be on this Zoom right now. With so many employees in San Francisco working for San Francisco businesses, but now living in Moraga or Milpitas or wherever, they need to make sure that we have that infrastructure in place. And this is really, I think, an opportunity for the state of California to really jump in and start to revamp some of that system. It is the new electricity. Also on a local level, all of us have been sheltered in place, and we have been basically living in a 20-block radius, getting coffee from within a 20-block radius. Probably Eric's even probably walked to Hukilau from his house. And so all these neighborhood commercial districts, if we move forward, even at 80% or 20% from work from home, a couple days a week, that means all of these local corridors become so much important. They become our living room, where we're using them for meetings, we're using them for office space, we're using them for quiet space. We're hopefully shopping and dining in our corridors. So in San Francisco, Clement Street, Geary Boulevard, Terraville, Irving, Judah, all of these, West Portal, all of them become these hubs. And we need to treat them, I believe, as sort of all new little mini downtowns that have every service that was downtown. Because I frankly think that San Francisco's downtown will probably be used 3-4 days out of the week, and the rest are going to be in these neighborhood commercial districts. So I'll maybe turn it over to any questions we have. Maybe Sherry or Eric have any thoughts?
Hi, this is Eric, and I'll start with a few questions. Everybody hear me? You hear me, Rodney?
Yes.
Okay. You and I, we've done business in San Francisco a long time. It's not it's a lonely job going up against progressives and being the one, champion for trying to stimulate businesses. So what do you say in our extremely progressive liberal city when people are saying, look, you guys have made money from San Francisco for the past 10, 15 years. Everyone's driving Teslas, all these big tech companies. It's time to pay back, time to give back. And that's why we're doing these taxes. We're in a crisis. What do you say to them? Because that's a hard argument to fight against.
It is. And, I think the message has to be shared with the progressives. I think for our perspective, we have to understand what their goals are. And then even to the moderates, we have to explain what their goals are. It's like just a pretty basic communication back and forth. And I know that's much easier said than done. But the moderates have to understand there are inequities. We do have a housing problem. We have the abilities and the smarts to help figure out some of those problems, and we need to be part of the solution and give a little bit, just as much as they have to understand that for San Francisco to recover, it's not going to do it with schools, nonprofits, and daycares. The business community was going to be what is going to grow back San Francisco, and they need us just as much as we need them. So again, total symbiotic relationship. We have to figure out the ways, I keep looking at you and thinking about your industry, how though we make it pencil out for building projects to happen, and that we be very truthful about what the margins are, the slim margins are in the real estate business. I think for a lot of people, they walk into a big fancy hotel, they see the marble floor, they see the chandelier, they see the red velvet couch, and they go, oh gosh, these guys must be making money hand over fist. If you know anything about the hospitality lodging business, it is a thin margin with like one rainy 4th of July weekend will just ruin your entire year. It's thin. So I think that people don't understand the real nuts and bolts of all aspects of a city. And we need to try to work together, or else it's just not going to happen if the business community is not here at all.
Definitely really appreciate what you're doing. We're developing a hotel right now, as you know, Rodney, and you're right, the margins are thin. A lot of people don't know this, but San Francisco, our hotel tax is probably some of the highest in the country. Our taxes, our business taxes, some of the highest in the country. We provide some incredible benefits for all people here in the city. So having that reduction is going to really help us try to relaunch.
Eric, one more thing I just want to mention, and I share it with everybody because if they have the opportunity, if you look at some of you pick your favorite nonprofit, the food bank, Glide Memorial. If you take away business and you take away some of the founders who are not even founders, employees who give either time or money, these nonprofits in San Francisco are going to take the biggest hit of all. Their philanthropic donation dollars, their corporate giving dollars goes way, 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 way down. And they probably are in the biggest world of hurt if truly 40% of San Francisco leaves San Francisco.
Definitely want to open it up for Sherry. If you have any questions, Michael, if you want to have any questions from the audience.
Yeah, so one of the questions that just came in, Rodney and Sherry, I think, would love to hear just generally your take on Hawaii as well. Maybe not for this question, but potentially on everything. So feel free to hop in here. So one of the questions that came in, Rodney, was, can you talk about some of the things being done to address the homeless situation in downtown SF, even before the pandemic, excuse me, it's hot over here. The situation was so dire, and it obviously really impacts tourism.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that's our biggest hurdle before the pandemic, and it is going to get worse when we get out. The navigation centers have been set up in San Francisco. They were met with controversy, of course, and some folks didn't want these navigation centers in their backyard. We're got to put them somewhere. Some experts have shared with me that the real problem with homelessness, in the name itself, they need a home, they need shelter, and we need to figure that out. Whether that's in San Francisco, outside of San Francisco, within the Bay Area, and obviously drug use and mental health is a significant component of that, all combined into sometimes multiple things. And so I'm not sure if it's, we throw a lot of money. San Francisco's looking at a $12 billion budget, obviously not all going to homeless services, but a lot of it going to homeless services. Money alone I don't think fixes it. It is political will. It is desire if San Francisco wants to have clean streets or not. This is an opportunity where I think in the past, and talking about those golden child years where San Franciscans didn't necessarily get involved, didn't get vocal. This is a real opportunity for all of us to say enough is enough. And we are all humanitarians. We all are compassionate, and we want to see folks get taken care of and helped out the best that we can help them out. But leaving them on the streets of San Francisco, to me, is the biggest irony of being a compassionate city, yet having to step over someone, which I would never do, but you're forced to do in San Francisco. Sherry, can you talk a little bit? Maybe I've seen the situation and more so in Honolulu, and how they've.
Yeah, we've definitely experienced an increase of homelessness, and with COVID, it just exacerbates the situation. Pre-COVID, we experienced one of the lowest unemployment rate in the nation to the highest unemployment rate in the nation just overnight. So it's had a significant impact, obviously. More than 200,000 got unemployed. Right now we're about 13%, but there's still a significant number unemployed, obviously because our tourism industry has been impacted, our number one industry. So similar to San Francisco, our tourism isn't reopened yet. And so it's had a dramatic impact on our small businesses. And, you know, we've done a number of surveys and 40% said they cannot reopen unless tourism opens on August 1st. Obviously, we're past August 1st. Got moved back to September. And then now October 1st because of our huge spikes in cases. So we're definitely concerned because the more people stay unemployed, I think the more we're going to see homelessness on the streets, but it's those resources. How can we get those resources? And it ties back to what Rodney said earlier. Businesses and their employees do a lot in providing and contributing to these social service agencies. So, you know, I think part of it, and Rodney mentioned about the power of numbers, and that is so true, and especially in the chamber business. Equally important is to tell your story. You know, tell your compelling stories, because much of the time business perceived as for-profit, big corporations, when in fact, and I would think, Rodney, most of your membership is small business.
70%.
So yeah, exactly, similar to ours. So, you know, when our lawmakers hear the compelling stories, many of these mom and pop stores and their institutions, their family-run businesses, you know, that's a lot more impactful. So we need to do a lot more with that. One of the things also here we're working on is the Mask Up campaign. We experienced pretty much a flattened curve down to 0 cases. And then all of a sudden, when the economy reopened, the Kama'aina economy, the local economy, we kind of relaxed and the cases spiked up again. So we went from the lowest, the safest, to now the highest number of cases per capita. And what we're trying to communicate is when you wear your mask, you're saving families, you're saving jobs, and you're saving the economy and our local. If you don't, and our cases continue to increase, then that's that much longer that we have to reopen our economy, which, as you know, if once we do that, once we delay the reopening, then that will shut down many businesses, and our small business will go away forever, which pretty much impact the livelihood and fabric of our communities and our families, which we don't want. So a lot of going on. You know, there's not one perfect solution. There's going to be a number of small solutions to big solutions, but that's why it's going to be more important to work collaboratively and in partnerships, even across our lines, even with other chambers and other states across the nation.
Rodney, one question that I had, and just as a quick note for the audience, in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, feel free to float up any questions that you have or in the chat. But, you know, I think one of the things that I've seen a lot is there's been a lot of talk about, and I think you hinted at this earlier about, especially with not knowing when things will open back up inside for bars and for restaurants and so forth. There's been talks about, you know, looking at helping restaurants, helping businesses expand into the open air spaces, similar to what we'd have in like the French Quarter, right, and so forth. Could you talk just a little bit about that side of, you know, if that's a policy issue, is that a regulation issue, and what kind of the discussions around that have been?
Yeah, Michael, you know, so many in the Mayor's Economic Task Force, so many of the things that came back to us were land use issues. And San Francisco is only 7 by 7, but it all came back to land use controls, zoning, and if that's an allowable use. I'm going to fuse your question, Mike, with Kyle's about Clement Street. Doing a simple street closure, as anyone's ever tried to do a birthday party for a kid and put a jumpy in the middle of the street, is a freaking nightmare, sorry. And it's just, you know, it's thousands of dollars, and it's an insurance binder, and it's all these things. Obviously we want to be safe, but we need to, and San Francisco, like Hawaii, is well poised to be able to do those kind of street closures. A number of years ago, I was enamored by Honolulu's Chinatown's First Fridays, which was that open street festival. They brought out artists, they brought out food, and I thought that always was a great thing to bring to San Francisco. This is the opportunity to do it. We all walk through those alleys of Chinatown and look up and say, wow, this would be cool if this was closed off to nighttime business, to bars, to music. This is our opportunity to do that. And so we have to push for that. I'm going to put an exclamation point on Sherry's point about small business. All of us on this phone call, write a letter, write a testimony, throw your idea out. Don't be afraid to say you're hurting. Don't be afraid to tell the truth. And no one's going to judge you, especially there's sort of the stigma that if you're a small business, you don't want to make a little complaint because a big business is not even thinking about that. It is so important right now that we hear from everybody. So important that we have a whole stack of letters to go to the Board of Supervisors and say, hey, they want to close Clement Street Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Keep it reasonable so we can get deliveries. Keep it reasonable so the residents can get through. But yes, just like the farmers market that there's there on Sunday and so successful, that can happen more than once. Where I think we have a competitive advantage over any other city, with the exception of Hawaii as a state, is the weather. We don't have snow. You try to do this in Chicago, you try to do this in New York, you're only going to have a few months to do it. And it's almost too hot in LA and too hot in Arizona to be able to do that. So San Francisco is just a great climate to push it outside. So hopefully that answers your question about the New Orleans activities. Hopefully we get a lot of alcohol served, but not too much alcohol served. But New Orleans has a great music culture, and San Francisco as well has a great music culture. One of the things that I fear is we lose that small business, arts, and culture. Because once we lose that, you guys, that's almost gone if we lose that. And
I'm bringing back the spam musubi eating contest.
There you go.
Culture outdoors.
Exactly. Do it. I'm in. But if we lose that art and culture and music, and that, if all of us are together right now, and I'd say, hey, let's go see some live music, we could find 4 different venues right now that are playing live music tonight. If we lose that, then we're going to lose why people stay in San Francisco, why people come to San Francisco, and why people who have never been there still aspire and want to be in San Francisco. So important we protect those groupings.
We have 2 more questions coming in from the crowd, and then I think we can wrap up here. So one, Mr. Kurt Osaki, thank you for joining. For those who don't know, Kurt, founder and CEO of Osaki Design, also one of the founders alongside Eric of the Hawaii Chamber. Thank you for joining us. Kurt, he's also on the board. He's on the Hawaii Chamber of Northern California. I have to define all the words here. This is getting a little bit complicated. And also on the board of the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. Kurt asks, travel and tourism is the backbone of both Hawaii and SF's economy. Is there an opportunity for both cities to work together in creating a travel bubble to kickstart tourism? Testing will obviously be key to the initiative. So how can we utilize the tech resources of the Bay Area to create rapid testing, safe model to open tourism and cut through the government bureaucracy? I know that was few parts to that question, but.
Kurt, good to see you. I know we've traded emails back and forth, and I love your design work. I think that's a great idea, and I think a large part of this is the marketing and design aspect of that. San Francisco and Hawaii are going to need a, come back, we're bouncing back stronger than ever campaign, whether that's video, whether that's graphic, whether that's storytelling, whether that's just like the Humans of New York, but Humans of Hawaii and Humans of San Francisco combined. The travel piece, I think, is really important. I think people will begin to travel, but they're going to go to sort of destinations that are within their reach at first. They're going to take a trip to LA first. They're going to expand a little bit, maybe go up to Seattle. They're going to go to Hawaii, but they're certainly not going to, I don't think, jump on an international flight all the way across the world as their first trip. So Hawaii makes a perfect, comfortable, easy back in piece. I'd love to talk more about that, introduce our San Francisco Travel Organization, SF Travel, to this conversation and how we kick that off. And obviously the airlines, United Airlines, Melinda U. Franklin is the chair right now of the Chamber of Commerce, San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. So I'm sure she would be happy to have that conversation with you, Sherry.
Sherry, do you have any thoughts there?
No, Kurt, as my board member, he, no, I think that's what we're challenged with right now. We're an island state, so it's hard to get tourists here. It is open, but with the 14-day quarantine, which is obviously cutting off a number of tourists coming here. But, you know, I think whatever we can do to collaborate and see how we can work in partnership in getting more residents from San Francisco visit Hawaii and Hawaii and vice versa. But we just got to get that testing, increase the testing capacity, as well as working with our partners. And Melinda is also a good supporter of our chamber as well. So it's nice to hear her name.
Good. Yes.
Please tell her I said hello.
Okay.
And so we'll do one final question here, and then we'll wrap up. We'll do the quick drawing, or it won't be a drawing, but the quick prizes, and then we'll wrap up. So the final question was, with news that so many large companies are on indefinite work from home status, many have left the Bay Area for good because it's too expensive. Do you see this as an opportunity for SF to reset on pricing, focus on local, or do you see this as a, you know, more long-term irreplaceable loss?
I think it's a combination of all of it. I think initially we're going to see some price reductions, but as we all know, you can only really sort of reduce it to a certain point. What I think is going to be an interesting thing to watch is how many leases don't get renewed and what the vacancy and how quickly the vacancy rate is. CBRE Real Estate has a survey, and they track all of a good majority of the leases in downtown San Francisco, and they know when they're going to come up. I believe that luckily there's sort of a nice laddering over the next 5 years of when they come up. But if people start to not renew those leases or walk away from them, that will be a key indicator to how bad it is. I do think the last piece is irreplaceable. I think to some degree, yes. I think San Francisco won't be the exact place it was. And also let's be a little bit honest too. I mean, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, we were all complaining that it took an hour and a half to get across town. Traffic was bad. It was very good for many businesses. For other people, it was very difficult. Muni was overcrowded. BART was overcrowded. So, you know, on the 8 years I served on the Planning Commission, we kept approving all of these office projects, which was great. But the level of housing projects was not in ratio, was not 1-to-1. And I said, hey, we keep packing them in here like sardines, but we can't really feed them and house them. What kind of good is that? We're just going to start upsetting people. So we do have a little room, a little cushion, I think, to be a little bit smaller. I obviously want to keep that money in San Francisco. One of the questions we had earlier about the supervisors and progressives, and I don't know the answer to this, but maybe someone on this call does. The mistake that we made, the city, is we didn't capture all of that tech, I won't say money, but just business transactions that occurred in and out of San Francisco. And it was sort of like water through our open fingers. And we were never really able to capture this. And I do think this is some of the frustration that progressives have to see how much money flowed in and out, and yet San Francisco didn't reap the benefits of that. We need to try to think ahead. When I talked about that value proposition, what's San Francisco going to look like in 2030? How do we capture that? How do we make that part of our city, not just tax it? How do we give incentive for help to ask people to, or force them to help build hospitals, to build infrastructure, to reinvest in San Francisco, and not just be users of San Francisco? That was a very long-winded answer to that question. Sorry.
No, that was great. Thank you. So really quickly, we do have, this is a little bit of an unexpected announcement, 2 round-trip Southwest airline tickets up that we're going to give away tonight. The only restrictions is, unfortunately, you can't be a panelist nor an active board member of HCCNC. I'm sorry. So how we're going to do this, because it's impossible to do a raffle, we're going to do this based on birth date, closest birth date to today, closest 2 birth dates to today. So you can, within the chat, I think if you're within like the August or September, shoot that up, and we'll try to announce that, and then we'll follow up with you in person. And yes, I am going to ask you for confirmation and follow up, but we'll get those sent out to you today or tomorrow. So anyone with an August or early September birthday, you have to put it in the chat. We got an October 9th. Anyone else? All right, if October 9th, we aren't doing that yet. Anyone close 9:15? 9:15 is pretty good. 9:15 is the closest. Do we have anyone else that's more than, what would that be? 10, 20, 40, 49 days? August 11th, there we go. So we have Kurt, August 11th, and then we have
Really, Kurt?
Kyle.
Is that your birthday? Come on.
So really quickly in wrapping up, I want to say thank you so very much, Rodney, Sherry, Jay, Eric, for speaking today. Thank you for everyone who joined. I think this is really critically important to have these discussions. And I would say that it's really, you know, we talk a lot about national politics, and I think we see that all over the news, but really, I think the seeds of change start at a local level, right? And it's really important for us to talk first about what are we doing at a local level to drive the change, to drive the improvements that we want to see. That's where I think we really have the most power as individuals and as a community. What we'll do in follow-up is we'll put this up on our website. Rodney will share this with you. We'll share this with your team, Sherry, so you can put that out. And I would just really recommend everyone to check out the SF Chamber, get involved with them. Obviously, check out HCCNC, check out the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. But you know, our job is to help serve, bring together the communities. And I think from the HCCNC perspective, this is so special because we, you know, are helping to fulfill our mission with doing these type of things, of bridging our two really incredible geographical regions. One of the things I read today on Twitter, who would have guessed, was there's really three things that make an incredible place. It's climate, coastline, and commerce, right? And I think both Hawaii and the San Francisco, Northern California area has that. So please, you know, share the recording with your family and friends. Tell them about what's happening. If you know local businesses that are not involved, you know, recommend for them to get involved. This is really, I think, in the next couple of years is going to be absolutely critical to drive towards 2030, as you were talking about, Rodney. You know, it's always a little bit of a fight now, but the effort that we put in now will start to have that effect. So our children and our grandchildren and so forth will grow up in the type of city that we want them to grow up in, or the type of state that we want them to grow up in, right? So I can't thank you both enough for what you're doing, and thank you so much for everyone on the line who joined us today. Please join us for next month's virtual event, which will be more of a wiki style mixer. And we look forward to seeing you all shortly. Eric, do you have anything?
I just want to, again, I want to thank everybody, you know, Rodney, Sherry, both know personally, and I want to also remind everyone in October, we are going to do a virtual, this was our 17th or 18th 5-Star Aloha Gala, where we'll be giving out the Kulia Ikanu'u Awards to the Sig Zane family, and giving out scholarships. So just want to make sure everyone knows that and can participate. So try and do good in these tough times.
Phenomenal. Thank you everyone for joining. Aloha hui ho, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Connor. Thank you.
Thank you.